Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Invest in Holland webinar about European e-commerce opportunities in times of social distancing. We will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Invest in Holland webinar about European e-commerce opportunities in times of social distancing. We will begin shortly. Welcome to this Invest in Holland webinar about European e-commerce opportunities in times of social distancing. We will begin shortly. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this live event broadcasted from the Netherlands. We have participants from around the globe in a variety of time zones, so enjoy your morning coffee or afternoon tea while we get this started. Today, you will learn more about European e-commerce opportunities in times of social distancing. We have 3 speakers today. The first speaker is Boudewijn Bart, Head of NFA Southeast in Atlanta. He will introduce the agenda and the other speakers and will moderate today's event. Boudewijn, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see, well, not really see, but at least learn that there's so many people joining our webinar today. We'll be talking about European e-commerce opportunities in times of social distancing. My name is Boudewijn Bart. I'm based out of Atlanta and actually talking from our office in Atlanta as well. So that's at least one geography covered. I am head of the Office of the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency in Atlanta. We are part of the Invest in Holland network, which was mentioned before. We have 30 offices all across the globe. Our main goal is to assist foreign companies in setting up operations from A to Z. We do this free of charge and, of course, confidential. So always happy to help. Check our website, investinholland.com, for more information. But enough about me and about us. We've got two speakers lined up for you that we think can give a great contribution to the topic of today. First off, Sarah Lone. She is the Chief Researcher of Intelligence Internet Retailing, which is the leading title for professionals in multi-channel retail and e-commerce across Europe and the UK. She'll be talking about trends and developments in the largest e-commerce markets in Europe, and she'll also talk about ramifications that COVID-19 so far have had. And then secondly, we've got Stan de Kaluwe from the Holland International Distribution Council. He's a senior supply chain manager at that organization. They're part of the Invest in Holland network too. Their goal is basically to assist UK and US companies in setting up the supply chain and distribution network in Europe. And Stan will be talking about things that are key in regards to being able to service your European customers in these times. But first off, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Boudewijn. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Lone, as was said. I actually really like intelligent retailing, Boudewijn. I think we may need to change our name because I think that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today. No, but it's really great to be here. It's fun as well. I'm actually an American living in the Netherlands, so we do really have all the geographies covered. We've got a Dutchman in America, we've got an American in the Netherlands, and we've got Stan, who is our token Dutch guy in the Netherlands. So we're doing pretty good. I'm going to give you today my American living in Europe perspective, but mainly about e-commerce. That's been my job for the past several years. That's mostly what I work on. So what I do really is help SMEs, so small to medium-sized businesses, sell more online across the border. And I sometimes help the bigger players if they're nice. So today we're going to talk about the opportunities and challenges in the e-commerce market in Europe. And I've titled the slides as such, so you can see what I think is an opportunity and or a challenge. But I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. So let's keep it interactive. And if you have questions, I'm always here to help. So I can give you a... Awesome. So first of all, there's no way that we can talk about e-commerce without talking about internet usage. This is nothing new, probably, but you might find it interesting. Every country is a little bit different, but the United States is actually only about 90% of the population is using the internet. So as you can see, we've got a lot of European countries where even more of them are using the internet than in the United States. So this is already an opportunity for e-commerce. As you can see, I think it's pretty clear. Iceland is definitely #1 with Norway. We've got Western markets that are always doing pretty well in internet use. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys just an example. It's kind of difficult to show dynamic data, so bear with me. This was my last ditch effort at showing you a cool map. This is the e-shopper penetration, as we like to call it, around the world. So the really dark blue colors are where people are shopping online a lot. And then the lighter colors are where less people are shopping online, basically. So as you can see, the United States, Australia, but definitely Europe has a lot of blue to it. So if I can zoom in a little bit more, Jelle, you can see that this is Europe. We actually see 91% of a lot of population shopping online. So in Sweden, in Norway, in the UK, of course, you can see these dark blues. So there's a really vibrant e-commerce market in Europe. They're all a little bit different, but it's very, very vibrant. So there's a lot of opportunity here for e-commerce. Okay, great. This is this is my secret slide. I'm probably not supposed to share this, but it's important. So this might be also in our upcoming e-commerce report that we have. We like to cover the market size. So this is the B2C in particular. We don't really focus so much on business to business, though that's a massive market in e-commerce as well in Europe. We focus more on B2C. So this is the business to consumer e-commerce sales and growth. What I wanted to show with this is that obviously the United Kingdom is just really taking the cake here. This is in euros, by the way. This is in 2018. This is in billions of euros of turnover. So the United Kingdom is definitely leading the way, but we can see France and Germany on the rise. In fact, in France, I think they just hit over 100 billion in e-commerce sales last year. So it's still a growing market. For what you can see at the very end of the spectrum here, I didn't include all the countries, but you can see Bulgaria, Serbia, and North Macedonia are really on the rise. And what we're noticing more and more is that Eastern European markets and Southern European markets, despite the fact that it looked like from the map that they weren't shopping online a whole lot, they are really, really developing very quickly. So it's kind of a market that I think everybody should be looking into, I would just say. Okay, I will go. Great. I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences, though. As you can see at the top, I called this one a challenge. So as an American living in the Netherlands, but also living now, I would say, in a couple different countries in Europe, I think it's really important to share to not only US and Canadian and UK retailers, but to other European retailers as well. There are massive differences in the way that consumers want to be sold to in European countries. So just to give you an example, just payment differences. In the Netherlands, we have something called Ideal, which is the #1 payment method. If you're American, at least I didn't know what this was until I moved here. This is its own special sort of bank transaction that happens. There's a whole app for it and everything. It's really, really great, actually. From coming from the American system, I think this is really nice and everything's pretty localized. But the important thing to take away from this is that it's very different for every country. Austria, of course, Invoice, and you can see Italy is PayPal, but there are also some markets that really still prefer cash on delivery. So this is just a sample of the differences between the payment methods that people want to see. So you have to pay attention to this because it's not always predictable, and you can't come in and just think, okay, they're all the same. It's okay, I can sell the same way. Okay, cool. Okay, so I also think this is a bit of a challenge. Maybe you can turn it into an opportunity. Bit of a challenge here. Delivery differences. So we have payment differences and we have delivery differences. As you can see, Norway has totally different Norway has a totally different perspective on delivery preferences than, let's say, Belgium, right? So I think most Americans, for example, would probably understand Belgium's model, which is mostly home delivery. But it's interesting that Norway has pickup points and that Ukraine has it where they want to collect it from the store. So I'm just showing you a sampling of different countries and how different they can be in their preferences. And let's see if I wanted to say one other thing about this. So this is a bit of an anecdote. As an American living in the Netherlands, I experienced recently buying something online from an American retailer. And what happened was when I got it, when it came here, it said you've got to pay 25 euros just to get it. So there was a huge customs fee for me. Well, I call that huge. I mean, the product wasn't that expensive. So I call that pretty huge. When you look at data, European consumers across the board, their delivery differences in their delivery preference differences are definitely in how they want to deliver. But across the board, they're all pretty united in saying, we don't want to have to find out what a customs charge would be after the fact. So I found that to be quite relevant for the webinar that we're doing right now, just to let you know that that is one of the things that can totally turn off a consumer from a web shop or a retailer, which is quite interesting. And I only did that research after it happened to me. So yeah, okay. Okay, cool. This is my my special marketplaces slide. I think that this is an interesting opportunity and or challenge. So the big discussion around online marketplaces, a lot of retailers think I can just go on Amazon is always a big player, especially for American retailers. Or if you're in the UK, you know, ASOS or of course Amazon as well. But I wanted to point out that there are a lot of marketplaces that are leading in certain markets that are not the typical ones that you would think of. They're not international, and actually they're quite local. So the best ones I can come up with for you are here. Of course, AliExpress is a bit of a big deal. But if you look at Poland, Allegro is definitely #1, way over any other marketplace. And if you look at Romania, eMag is also #1. These are things that you might not know about a market until you start doing a lot of market entry research into it. And then also in the Netherlands, we have bol.com. Amazon just hit our market recently this year, and it seems like Dutch consumers are still very happy to shop on bol.com, as are Belgian consumers. That's what the data shows us, at least. And I just wanted to hit again on the idea that local, because even Google isn't universal. So in Czech Republic or Czechia, they have their own search player, which is seznam.cz, as you can see on the right, obviously. But I just want to point out that there are a lot of different aspects to selling in each market. Okay. So with that in mind, there are there is a lot of data that shows us that over time, Europeans have become more and more willing to buy online across the border, specifically from other EU countries. And I picked out a couple here to show the spectrum, right? So we've got, you know, Southern Europe, we've even got Iceland here. So I thought, okay, let's try to look at a wide spectrum. People in Europe are definitely willing to buy from across the border. But what you need to remember, and I wrote this down, so I'm going to just read from my notes briefly because I want to really get this point across. It's incredibly important for consumers that they're able to return an item very easily and cheaply with e-commerce. The whole purpose of e-commerce is convenience, 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 and a cheaper price. If they can't return it conveniently or cheaply, you're not likely to make that sale. So it's really hard to do that when you have to take into consideration customs and everything else. They need an ability for redress. So they want to know that there's somebody local or nearby, at least sort of, that they can contact. They also want no customs issues or fees when the package arrives to them. They also want cheaper and faster delivery. So as Amazon is around, it has set the expectation for consumers that they want cheap, fast delivery. It's really hard to do that if you're trying to ship from across the border or from overseas into Europe. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing is that the payment methods of what they want. So what you can see here is over time, more countries are buying from EU countries, from other EU countries, but you are seeing a decrease in the online purchasing from sellers from the rest of the world. And I think this has a lot to do with the things that I just said, which is that they want to be able to return it. They want to know there's an opportunity for redress if they need it. They want to know that they can get it cheap, fast delivery. So, okay. Not belabor the point. These are some of the challenges, the problems, excuse me, that people encountered when ordering online. And it's 5:30 here. So this I would call one of the challenges in the e-commerce market, particularly in Europe. So as you can see, the countries are a little bit different. What's interesting is that if you live in an island such as Malta or Iceland, these are some of the biggest challenges or problems that they had, and it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, if you think about everything it takes to get into Malta or into Iceland as an island, or maybe even the cost of that. So these are some of the main issues in these countries. In fact, I think that it's getting a bit better, but this is updated from 2019. So we still see a lot of people shopping online who have had these issues. So I put a little chat box here on the right for you for later when you're looking at this and I'm not talking. It's really important to keep convenience and cheap prices, especially if they're ordering from a non-EU store. So just keep all this in mind when you want to sell online. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, let's move to COVID because everybody wants to know about this, right? There are definitely some retailer struggles in Europe during COVID-19. We have seen country borders be closed, which is unprecedented in Europe. I don't think any of us, I definitely don't, but maybe Stan, you remember a time when they were closed, I don't know. There's been a huge strain on the logistics and the supply chain. So this is something, in my job, I talk to e-commerce associations across Europe, across the world actually, but definitely across Europe. And lately, every single one of them has said all of our retailers have experienced disruptions in the supply chain or the logistics unless they source locally. If they source locally, it's a bit less of an issue. What they're definitely noticing is that if the goods are coming from outside the EU, there's even more of a struggle. There's a question of when they will get it or not. So as you can see, in France, the retailers are definitely having an issue. The activity of supply providers has been disrupted. And this is data from the French E-commerce Association. So they have asked their members exactly what have you encountered lately, and this is what they've encountered. And then also for German retailers, delivery delays, delays in assortment planning. So as you can see, there's definitely an issue from COVID when it comes to logistics and disruptions, which is funny because in Germany, well, none of it's funny, but it's a bit interesting that Germany is rated the #1 in the logistics performance index across the world. And even still, when a crisis like COVID happens, they're still not as prepared as they could be, especially in the world of e-commerce now that everybody wants to buy groceries online. Okay. I think I have one more on COVID. So this one is about consumers. I thought you would be interested in hearing about retailers, but also about consumers. So the pie chart on the left is actually our own from Internet Retailing. We did our own analysis, a consumer survey of UK consumers. And a lot of them actually are going to continue shopping as they do now, which is fantastic for e-commerce. I think you've seen a massive growth in e-commerce in general, especially from older populations who typically were not shopping online before and now are shopping online because there is no other option really for them. So I think what we're going to see now coming up, the trend is to buy local. I really think that will be the trend. And I don't mean necessarily local as in, only local brands, but buying something where you can get it. It's in that country or it's sourced nearby, at least in the EU. I think all the e-commerce associations that I've spoken to have said that. They have made that as their prediction that people will be shopping more and they will be shopping more locally. So, okay, that's it for that slide. Maybe Yelly, you can switch it for me. Oh, okay, I can keep talking about COVID if you want. That's fine for me. So fashion has decreased in most markets. Grocery has increased substantially. Maybe this is an interesting tidbit. Oh, okay, cool. I'll just tell you my interesting tidbit as well, because I think I have another minute or two. Interesting tidbit. The biggest grocery markets for e-commerce were actually in the UK and France, but still, even though they're really big, they were only 6 or 7% of the total e-commerce market. So grocery has forever in e-commerce been really small. And I think in Germany, it's only like 1 or 2%. However, we're seeing almost 100% increases across the board in Europe, especially. So it's really interesting to see what happens after the fact. There's a lot of logistics that go behind grocery shopping and buying online, and it's something that international retailers might struggle with because that's quite a behemoth of a market. So, okay, anyway, I will wrap it up. So, opportunity. This is kind of my wrap up. I have 2 wrap up slides for you. Opportunity. Europe is a growing market, despite the fact that it looks like we may have plateaued in some places like the United Kingdom. They're still growing at a 13% growth rate. So that's awesome, but especially in Eastern European countries. So even the markets that you might think, I'm not sure if it's really going anywhere necessarily with e-commerce, they definitely are. Another opportunity, European consumers have purchasing power and trust in e-commerce, and they willingly shop online. So we definitely see this across the board as well, that they definitely do trust e-commerce and they want to buy online. Not only that, we have a lot of trust marks in Europe, a lot of e-commerce trust marks. So European consumers know how to trust e-commerce because they can very easily see different trust marks and they can know that a web shop is safe. The challenge, okay, these are just some of the preferences of the consumers in each country, the delivery and the payment methods. There are many more complex ones, so I put here sustainability. I spoke recently with the E-commerce Association in Poland, and I said, what's happening in Poland when it comes to sustainability? And he sort of looked at me and he said, nothing, nobody's really concerned about that. So there will be some markets that are not really caring about something like sustainability just yet. So if your whole marketing strategy is about sustainability, maybe you need a different strategy for Poland, versus if you look at a country like Norway, where people are actually willing to pay more money to get something in a more sustainable way or with less packaging, for example. And then language preferences. That's also a really important aspect to take into consideration. The Dutch are okay with shopping in English, roughly, but the French really want to be sold to in French. So these are some specifics that you might not know unless you do a lot of extra research. Delivery wait time expectations. But I just want to throw one other thing out there before my time runs out, which is coming very quickly, I think, is that security is a big issue, and it's a difference in each European country for what the consumer expects to see on your website regarding security. So cybersecurity, GDPR compliance, etc. So just to reiterate, there is no Europe strategy. There is an individual country strategy when it comes to e-commerce and coming and expanding into a country. Okay, I think I have one more wrap-up slide, maybe. Yeah, okay. This is my last one and then I'm done. So challenge, there are, of course, important differences. You need to know your target audience. I kind of already said that. And challenge, marketplaces can be a good strategy, a good entry strategy, though there are several different ones. Amazon isn't everywhere. This is really important for my American retailers out there because I know that that's the standard, it seems, in the United States. But they're not everywhere, and they're definitely not everywhere in Europe. Okay, and then maybe a challenge or an opportunity. I'm interested to hear everybody else's thoughts on this. COVID-19. A lot of associations feel it's an opportunity for e-commerce to thrive and for us to enter the digital age. And others think this is really going to kill some shops, some SMEs. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. And I am finally done. I will hand it over to everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for that was a lot of information. It went pretty quickly as well. I'm sure there's quite a few people that have some questions, but I'd like to save them for the end. Please use the Q&A box. I actually forgot to mention that in my intro. Thank you for that, for doing that, Sarah. But before we move to the questions, I'd like to move it over to Stan to talk a little bit more about actually the supply chain aspect of e-commerce and e-fulfillment. So Stan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Boudewijn, and thank you, Sarah, for that information. I think very useful, and I think definitely the current crisis has its opportunities. And one of them, for sure, is the fact that a lot of people that refused to shop online were forced to, and now they are sold. So if you look at the figures from the UK, how many people actually started to shop online, that's very interesting to see. So we expect this boom to continue. I have a couple of topics, and before I go into my slides, please note that everyone that registered for the event today, you will get the presentation, you will get the slides in your email box. So I saw a question about one of the slides. Don't worry, you'll get it. So what I'll talk about is a couple of things. I will talk about fulfillment models. So you can sell online, but how do you get those products to the European consumer, and how do you keep that European consumer happy? I will also give my take on the ramifications of COVID in the last mile. I will briefly talk about Brexit, about how to deal with value-added tax, which is always a fun subject, and I will share 2 success stories. And hopefully we'll go into some interactive part of this webinar afterwards. So about fulfillment, there's basically 2 models in general terms. So you can sell from your overseas stock, and overseas for US and Canadian companies means from North America, obviously. For the UK, it's not such a big C, but still it will come from a different territory, especially after Brexit. So I think this is relevant for both UK and US and Canadian brands. So one of them is shipping each individual order into the European Union, or fulfilling your orders from inside the European Union. So if you look at that first model where you ship from your own international stock, there are a couple of good reasons to do that. For example, you want to keep all of your stock together. If you have unique products, if you have a long tail of products, so you have a lot of different SKUs, maybe you don't want to split stock and keep it in one place, or simply because it's the easiest way to go. You are based in the US, people are ordering your product from your website with their credit card, and they want them to ship it to Poland or Portugal. You can do that. The risk is that when you send that by regular parcel or postal service, then the consumer would find it at their doorstep, having to pay a lot of taxes, value-added tax, duties, and very high shipping costs, which is not a great consumer experience. Fortunately, there are great solutions out there that make sure that this transparency to the consumer is presented. And this is just one example from a company that I spoke to last year. It's called Warehouse Skateboards. They have every skateboard you can think in the world in their fulfillment center in the US. And if you're a skater, I'm not, but if you're a skater and you want that particular skateboard, you're willing to wait a while and you're willing to pay the extra costs. But it would help if in the online shop, you can actually see what those costs are. So here you can see that there's a value added tax of 40 euros, there's duties added, and there's shipping and handling. So this 160 euro longboard actually will cost you about 280 euros. So it is transparent. It's not great news, but it is transparent and you don't get stuck with any surprises. So here the second bullet says DDU shipping, so delivery duties unpaid shipping, is a no-go. If the consumer pays it at their doorstep, they will never order again with you. So this is an example of UPS. It's called the iParcel service. That's just one of a couple of great examples. So on the next slide, you can see that it depends really on the country in Europe what kind of additional costs will be added. You can see it in the graph on the right that there's extra costs for import clearance. Is it possible to deliver it to the doorstep, or will the consumer only be able to pick it up at the post office? So those are all limitations that differ from country to country. And there's a list of potential additional fees. So what are the advantages? It's really easy to set up. You can start shipping tomorrow. There's a minimal integration and you can scale quickly. The challenges are quite obvious. It's a long delivery time. The shipping rates are high. If you send every individual parcel cross Atlantic or cross border, then it's becoming very costly. So it's not a great way to grow in Europe. Okay, so let's look at it from the consumer perspective, and I think Sarah did a great job on talking about what the European consumer wants, even if there is a European consumer, because they won't call themselves Europeans, unfortunately. But most of them, just adding them all together, would say, if during my shopping experience it shows that all additional costs that come in the end are too high, I will abandon my cart and not make the purchase. They also say, I found this product, I really want it as quickly as possible. If it takes too long, the delivery, they will abandon their cart. The same if their delivery process was a poor experience, they will not go through it again. That's what 38% of shoppers say. So really, these are such important factors that there's a good reason to make sure the delivery process is streamlined and seamless. So what is the solution? It is having your stock inside Europe, inside the European Union, within the borders of the European Union. So you're close to the consumer and you have all duties and additional costs covered. So there's two ways to do that. And let me start with a name we all know, and probably the business that is doing the best currently in this crisis. We all know about how much money they're making currently. But that's because they have a great solution and a very consumer-focused platform. So you can profit from that. They're actually the only pan-European platform out there. And pan-European doesn't really mean that it covers the EU 28 countries. It covers most large geographies. And lucky for us, they only started in the Netherlands last month. So now we can enjoy Amazon as well. But there's a lot of countries that don't have Amazon. Anyway, they offer a service called Fulfillment by Amazon, and it's the system that Amazon makes available to sellers, so you don't have to worry about anything besides restocking your product. So they receive your product, they store them, they ship them, they handle the returns, and they provide customer care in the right languages, so in the local languages, which is quite nice. But what's important before you start using the service is that you understand the costs and you understand the advantages and the challenges. Well, some of the advantages are you can use their discounted shipping rates, which is nice. It's quite effortless, and they take away a lot of the difficult fulfillment stuff that you otherwise could get stuck with. So let's look at the downsides of it. Which is cost related, but also risk related. So if you look at the costs, as long as you're a small seller, it's doable because they will take a percentage of what you do online on their platform or on your own web shop or other platforms. So they will charge you a fixed fee, which is not a lot, but they will charge you a platform fee. They will charge you for the use of FBA. They will charge you not necessarily directly for marketing, but there will be marketing costs. That is for after, and it will take you a lot of time to be successful on Amazon. So let me point that out as well. To be, especially if you use their own platform, you will need to invest a lot of time to be found among the sea of products that is on Amazon. So these are some of the challenges to take into account, and really this works best for individuals or smaller sellers. Just maybe to get a feel for what works in Europe. What kind of products do I sell? What kind of products do get traction in the European market? So it's a great test environment, basically. What's important, by the way, is that you don't have leverage by Amazon, which is really something you should take into account. Amazon is a big player, and if you're completely dependent on Amazon, then you can get in a nasty pickle. Like last month, when in France, the Amazon fulfillment centers were closed because they had an issue with worker protection in their fulfillment centers around Corona. And they've been closed for a long time while they were in court. So it just opened yesterday or 2 days ago, I think. They reopened their French warehouses after a month of shutdown. So if they would do their fulfillment by Amazon from their warehouse in this time, then there would be an issue, right? So it is really a risk. And what another risk is that they get a lot of your data. So they know exactly what kind of products are doing well. And we've heard stories about them starting to sell those products themselves. So it's a risk, just to be aware of that. So what's the other option then? The other option is to work with a third-party fulfillment partner. I work for the Holland International Distribution Council. We consist of 300 companies in the Netherlands that are active in international logistics. And about half of them are logistic service providers. So about 150, and about a half of those, about 75, they are fulfillment specialists. So they pick, pack, and ship on behalf of their overseas clients. And a lot of them, they offer value-added services that you could use as a service. So this is one way you could find that ideal logistics partner that works well with your product and with your market. Another option, of course, is to have your own setup, your own warehouse, your own fulfillment center, which makes sense to look into if you have large volumes and predictable volumes. So a third-party logistics company, they can help you with a lot of different things. They can do the returns management, they can do customer service, order fulfillment, connect into various platforms. So you can focus on what's important, is selling the products online. So here I've shown a map of Europe. I hope you all recognize that. This is Europe, and the Netherlands is right in the middle. So this is an example of a company that leverages its own fulfillment center or outsourced fulfillment center for their market development. So what you see here on the map is that they have both B2C shipments and B2B shipments from their fulfillment center. So they've chosen to diversify their European strategy. In Southern Europe, they are shipping to local shops. So their market research showed that their biggest chance of success of selling products is working with small local shops. So they're shipping B2B to those local shops. For Central Europe, they're actually shipping directly to consumers. So to Germany, to France, they're shipping to consumers that order the products on their own web shop or potentially through influencers online. In Poland, they're using the Amazon platform. In the Nordics, they're working through a distributor. So they have a master distributor there that takes care of their entire Nordics market. And in the UK, they're using Argos as a platform. So this is to show that having a fulfillment center opens up a lot of different sales channels. And what we see when we start working with a company that says, I want to sell products to German consumers directly, that when they set this up, they actually see that there's a lot more opportunity because they have that European presence in the form of a fulfillment center. So yeah, that's the first bullet. It mimics a European presence. Of course, on your own web shop, you could say, that you have a European phone number, which is quite easy to get, actually, a European phone number. But if the shipping and shopping experience is not localized, you're really not going to get that major growth that you're looking for. Also, it gives you the opportunity to lower the minimum order size. So you can start shipping for free, and we love shipping free, definitely here in the Netherlands, but a lot of European countries. So you really want to offer that at a lower order size, for example, 30 euros or 50 euros. You get a lot of carrier flexibility. So if you ship individual parcels cross-Atlantic, you're stuck with a couple of providers. If you're here in Europe, you can use the local heroes. So here in the Netherlands, we have PostNL, which is the local post office. They have a great cost-quality ratio. For Germany, you might want to work with DHL, for example. For France, with La Poste. You can use all those different carriers if you're based here. Another thing, and that's the last bullet, is if you have a distribution center in the Netherlands, then you're exempt of prepaying import VAT, which gives you a positive cash flow. It's a bit technical maybe, but I'll go into that later. I see I have to rush a little bit because I'm running over. Your European fulfillment partner, you know, it all sounds great, but there are some challenges. So you might feel a bit challenged about leaving that control to someone else, especially if you do your own fulfillment in your own market. Working with a partner overseas might feel a bit daunting. So it's really important to get that right partner and go to the search process in a correct manner. You have to integrate quite well by IT, and you have to manage the value-added tax. And there's to come back to my first example about the skateboards, there's a different fulfillment model for each product. So those unique skateboards, it makes sense to do international drop shipments from a centralized stock. But these are some examples, and I will send these over to all of you to look at those. For each product, there's a different ideal setup. And we're happy to discuss what works for you and for your product. So the takeaways, for unique products or very cheap products, it may make sense to use international mail or international drop shipments. But if you want to compete on the European market, and especially if your products compete with European products, then it's a must to be present in Europe. And the same goes for UK brands after Brexit. You have to be on the continent to be able to compete. There are some costs involved. And the Netherlands, as you see in the map, we're right in the middle of the main European markets. That means you have a 24 to 48 hour, depends on the cost level, lead time to those markets, which consumers will love. Okay, so how to deal with VAT? This is a little bit technical if you're not used to working with value-added tax. And the UK companies online here, they are used to it. But if you're from the US or Canada and you don't have European business yet, it can be a bit daunting. So just really briefly, there are two taxes as soon as you import a product. So one is the duty, which is a percentage of the value that you pay and you cannot reclaim. And then there's the value-added tax, which is a tax if you import a product, you can reclaim it. There's no VAT for products under 22 euros. So all the cheap stuff from China is VAT exempt. And if you have products under 22 euros, that's really an unfair way to get into the European market, because if you would sell it from Europe, you would pay value-added tax. And you have to charge VAT to consumers. So what's important, for every shipment that enters the EU, you have to pay duties and VAT if you're over these thresholds. It also means there's a lot of extra administration involved and can incur costs and delays. So how to deal with that in an easy way? In the Netherlands, we have a system called the VAT deferment system. You need a certain license, which is quite easy to obtain. That means that you don't have to pay value-added tax upon import. So we have a great clip online. We'll send that link to you as well. That explains it. I will not do that right now, but dive into it, Google Article 23, and you'll get all the necessary information. This is quite unique to the Netherlands, and you can even use it if you don't have a company set up here. You can work through a fiscal representative, which is a third party, can be a legal firm or a customs broker or a logistics company. They can be your fiscal representative. They can apply for you for a VAT number, do all your VAT filings, and they can make sure you get that VAT deferment license. So that really helps you dealing with VAT. Actually, they will take care of all of it for a fee, of course, and you can focus on the things that are more important. So there are some changes in value-added tax coming up. They should be implemented January 1, 2021, but because of the Corona crisis and the EU 28 not being ready to implement, they decided to postpone for 6 months. So I won't go into detail, but it will simplify how cross-border selling works in Europe right now. I would love to explain more if you're interested, but for now I'll leave it where it is and go to the next slide. So this is where Sarah already talked about. There are some disruptions because of COVID. And it's mostly because e-commerce is booming. So the carrier networks can't handle the volume growth. What does that mean? It means that a lot of parcels are delayed 1 or 2 days, that returns are delayed, but it also has more significant implications across Europe in some countries because pickup and drop-off points are closed, for example, because it's not allowed to sign for delivery. There are size limitations, so big parcels can no longer be handled. And there are disruptions at the border and at ports and airports, and especially for the intercontinental parcel flow, that's really disruptive. The air cargo rates have skyrocketed as well. A lot of the parcels would be transported in bellies, cargo bellies of passenger planes. They are no longer used. So there's a crunch in the capacity of cargo. About Brexit, well, there's still a lot uncertain, and hopefully there will be a deal within, basically we only have 4 or 5 months to create a deal that would normally take a couple of years. This deal typically would cover customs. So are there import duties? And how are the customs administrative handling, how's that done between both markets? For now, there's only uncertainty. So the thing that is certain that a lot will change. And what we already see is that a lot of UK brands and retailers are looking to set up a mainland location. And so they would typically split both markets. They have a UK facility and a mainland facility. And we'll see the UK market, of course, is a really big market. So for a lot of companies that will work. Other companies would maybe say, okay, we're moving our UK fulfillment facility to the mainland and we'll start fulfilling our orders from the UK from there as well. So I have 2 examples for you guys, and that's my final slides on success stories. And this is a project I worked on last year. It's the Monster Group from the UK. It's a retailer, and they have their own products, their own branded products in storage, home and business supplies. And they saw that their sales in the mainland were already growing, but they also saw that, and they have quite some heavy, bulky items, that their shipping rates were quite high. Also, they wanted to be ahead of what's coming for Brexit, so a European fulfillment center really made sense. And we helped them in the process of finding a location in the Netherlands, and they selected Venlo, which is a town in the southeast of the Netherlands. It's actually the European fulfillment hotspot. where a lot of businesses do their fulfillment. And what they found is that really is for their lead times and for their returns process a winning location. It's really close to Germany, about 15 minutes from the German border. It's really close to Belgium and France. It's in the Netherlands, so they have that VAT deferment license that I talked about, and they enjoyed the language skills that we have here in the Netherlands. So what they say, what felt like an expensive insurance policy for Brexit was quickly a solid business case and a driver for growth. Another example is a company in the illumination tools, and maybe Martin, I saw you registered, so I hope you're doing well. I loved working with you. We took Martin to a couple of logistics partners in the Netherlands to see if there would be a connection and if they can offer the service that they were looking for. They were shipping orders to online platforms, distributors in Europe, B2B. A lot of their products subsequently sold online, but they were shipping it from Pennsylvania in the US. And with their outsourced logistics partner, they now have brought down that lead time to 24 to 48 hours. Also, they really brought back the minimum order value, and they have no longer any hassle with VAT and duties. Other success stories, I've included a couple of brands here. Those are companies that we worked with in the Invest in Holland network that either have their own fulfillment facility in the Netherlands or have outsourced it to a third party. And that's where I wanted to give it back to Boudewijn. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you, Stan. A lot of options. That's always good in a growing market. Also quite a few challenges, of course. Sarah already touched upon a few of those. We have a couple of questions that came in during both presentations. I'd like to figure out a good way to ask them. You mentioned Brexit already, so there's one person here that asked a question, Lee actually, that says, currently all my stock is in the UK, my sales are also mainly in the UK, but I'm looking to sell into the rest of the EU and into Europe. What would you recommend? Move to the EU or fulfill it from the UK? And maybe another question from my end on top of that, what is your organization in that regard, Stan, can provide basically if you do encounter such a question, and what would you recommend them doing?
Yeah, I think it's a question we get a lot, and it's hard to say. If I had a crystal ball, Lee, I would definitely use it for you. It's hard to say how seamless your shipments will pass through the border after January 1, 2021, sorry. It's already in 7 months. So if there's a trade deal, then there's a chance that this will go fairly seamlessly. But this trade deal is very uncertain. So what you can do is start looking into what would it mean to move part of my stock to Europe. And if you would start very small, okay, maybe then it's not worth it yet, but it's good to have that scenario ready, because when you know what will happen on January 1, you have to have that plan to put it in motion. So you can start by speaking to fulfillment companies in Europe on the mainland, just to see what would be the time to implement, what would be the costs associated. And what we do in that process is we would look at your products, at your destination markets, your sales channels, your volumes, and based on that, we would suggest a short list of fulfillment partners. Like I said, we have about 75 e-fulfillment specialists in our council. We will not send a list of those 75 because that doesn't help you. What we would ask you is to fill out a logistics questionnaire to get the requirements clear, so we know exactly what you would need. And of course, it's hard to see where you are in 2-3 years, but we can all dream, and we'll find that partner that can help you with that growth and with those dreams, and that will take you serious as a client. So that's how we approach that matchmaking process. We would really want you to speak to just a couple of fulfillment partners that are a great match with what you need. Another option for you is just see what happens. you can, after Brexit, still send parcels to Germany, but the consumer experience will not be great. So if the German client really wants your product, they will go through it. But if they can find a similar product within the European Union, they will probably go for that. All right.
Stan.
Do we have other questions?
Yeah, another one that's actually also a bit Brexit related towards Sarah. When you look at the e-commerce market, Sarah, on the European front, any thoughts on what that will look like post-Brexit? And then on top of that, what would you advise companies when you look at their strategy, for example, and say you're a UK company, you have a product that works there, you want to sell it in the rest of Europe as well. What do you want them to pay attention to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like I need to say, I'm not getting paid to say this, but I would definitely suggest consider the Netherlands. And I can safely say that as someone who came here and felt like I was kind of still in America. So there's this feeling here, everybody really speaks English. There's a willingness to work with traders and with merchants. And I think there's this really tech hub center as well. But what I would say to consider, well, first of all, I think Brexit is going to have a massive impact, not just on retailers, of course, selling, from the UK into Europe, but also on retailers who are trying to sell into the UK. But I think the supply chain is going to be a bit of an issue with them. So I've talked before with some e-commerce retailers who are saying, I'm a bit concerned because throughout the supply chain, let's say they get their tulips from the Netherlands, they're quite worried that a regular flower shop, a small business flower shop who sells flowers online is not going to be able to put in their order in the morning for flowers and have it the same day to be able to sell those flowers online. So I think really, if they're already working with a supply chain, somewhere in the supply chain with somebody in Europe, I think that's another perfect incentive for them to look and say, okay, can I keep using that and then work from there to sell into Europe? Because I think we are going to see a lot of issues there. What I would say to look for the consumers in particular, and I think Stan touched on this before. I tried to write some stuff down of what you said because I thought that's really, really perfect. I think a lot of people will be turning, especially small to medium-sized businesses, will be turning to an answer like Amazon. And I don't mean to rail on Amazon. I think Amazon is a really great opportunity for market entry research, especially from small to medium-sized businesses. But they do get your data and your customers' data. And I think if you're going to try to expand your strategy into Europe, you need to have access to your customer data because you need to try to research them and you need to try to understand them better because they will not be like your British consumers or Irish consumers or Scottish consumers. So I do think it's really important to have access to your consumer data. Not only that, but I think a lot of European consumers are more and more concerned with their security. So if you look at French consumers, for example, they're very concerned about their security and they know a lot about cybersecurity. That might be different in other parts of Europe. So I think having a handle on your own data is really important. And then I think everything that Stan said, I think as well, I can only highlight that you really want to make it as seamless as possible for your consumer, because the moment that they come into any kind of barrier whatsoever, they will just stop. They will just stop shopping, whether it's on a mobile device. And that's also a new thing I would say. One really last quick thing. Sorry, I'm from the Midwest, so I just keep going on that. If you're going to expand into Europe, you definitely need to consider your mobile strategy as well. Mobile has overtaken desktop buying in both France and Germany already. The UK as well is also going crazy with mobile shopping. So you need to consider whether you want to have a mobile app or if you want to have just a mobile-friendly web page. Make that super seamless. Get somebody to do it. Don't try to do it in-house because we will all know that it was not done very well. So there's that. And I think, oh yeah, technology. See if you can invest in some sort of AI to get to know your consumers and personalize better. So those are some things I would say, especially to people who are typically used to selling in the UK, who are now trying to sell in Europe. Get to know your target audience and your consumer better. Sorry, I'm done.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that was insightful and useful for everybody. So maybe Stan, to wrap it up, two questions that are sort of related because they're VAT and custom fee and duty related. The first one is, say I'm a German company and I'm selling to a French customer. Does the French customer in that case pay the customs fee, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, valid question. No, as soon as the product is inside the European Union, it's free to move anywhere. So you're not dealing with customs duties or any border matters anymore. So that's the big benefit of bringing your product in bulk inside the European Union. So a container or a couple of pallets cleared for customs, and then you're free to sell it wherever in the European Union to either business to business or business to consumer. Of course, you do have to still deal with value-added tax. So now, before we get that reform in 2021, you still have to charge the local VAT rate. So if you sell from the Netherlands, your stock is in the Netherlands, you sell it to a German, then you have to charge the Dutch VAT rate until a certain threshold. If you hit that threshold, which could be, I think in German case, it's 100,000 euro. If you have 100,000 sales in Germany, then you have to start charging German VAT. I know it's a bit of a headache, but it's really important to get that right, the value-added tax. And I saw another question about that. So there's no customs payment. Let me see. Yeah, if the stock is owned by, thank you, Annemie, for that question. If the stock is owned by you as an overseas shipper, yes. This is a third-party logistics model that I talked about. So you ship the product into Europe. The customs clearance is done by a logistics company. You can do it as well, but they offer that often as a service. Put it in their warehouse and then ship it to the consumer while the product is still owned by you. So really it's a third-party model, and the logistics company will never take ownership of the product.
All right, Stan, thank you for that. I appreciate addressing the question as well that came into the Q&A box. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so we'll be closing this webinar as of now. I do want to mention that we will be coming up with some new content as well the next couple of months. One of them will be about the VAT. There will be a new VAT regulation that will be installed in 2021 that Stan already addressed, so stay tuned for that. In the meanwhile, if you have any comments on what we've provided today, please let us know. It always gives us an opportunity to improve our quality. Last but not least, I'd like to thank our contributors. Sarah, thank you for your insights and your presentation. Stan, same to you. And wish you a great rest of the day and stay safe.